The headline appeared like fire on dry grass, spreading faster than reason. Daniel's name blazed across every screen, twisted into a villain he never chose to be. He whispered, "This isn't me," but the noise drowned him out. Crowds cheered his downfall online. Hashtags piling like stones hurled in a square. Once respected, now erased, his career burned in digital flames. Betrayal did not arrive quietly. It screamed, hungry for spectacle. Emma, his closest friend, typed furiously, defending him against the tide. Yet for every word of loyalty, more knives came for her. Daniel staggered under the weight, heart pounding, vision blurred, as if the whole city had turned its eyes on him. He saw co-workers he once trusted sharing the viral posts with cold smiles. Fear replaced warmth. Confusion smothered hope. His reputation collapsed not with silence but with thunder. The scandal did not arrive like a thief in the night. It arrived like a parade of torches. Daniel scrolled through endless posts, each one darker than the last. His voice cracked as he whispered, "How did it turn so fast?" Emma messaged him, insisting, "You're not alone. I'm here." But even her loyalty trembled against the storm. The betrayal cut sharper as he saw old friends sharing the posts with glee. He remembered their laughter in better days, now replaced with silence or mockery. Headlines were not reporting, they were condemning. His career was rewritten in real time, his past erased to amplify outrage. Even his own reflection began to look like a stranger. Daniel pressed his palms against his temples, suffocating under a storm louder than truth. Morning arrived, but no light felt warm. Daniel walked into the office, every step heavier than the last. Whispers curled around him like smoke. His name dragged through unseen mouths. Emma called, "Ignore them, Daniel, hold on," but the words cracked over the line. The silence of colleagues burned worse than their words. He noticed the enabler, Ryan, smirking faintly as he shook hands with a supervisor. His chance finally here. Daniel's chest tightened. Once, this place was his sanctuary. Now, it was a hunting ground. Each desk he passed felt like a jury bench, every glance a verdict. The world he built with sweat and faith was collapsing not with flames, but with cold indifference. The first article framed him as guilty before a trial. Daniel scrolled through words laced with venom, phrases twisted to bury context. "Loyalty," he muttered, "is a crime now." Emma's comment defending him was drowned by hundreds calling her a fool. The silent betrayal from his sister, Lily, cut deepest. He saw her post nothing, say nothing, though once she had sworn they would always stand together. Her silence thundered in his chest. Every passing second painted him further as a monster he had never been. His heart raced. If silence from family felt like betrayal, what chance did truth have? Outside, the city pulsed with indifference. Cars roared, screens blinked, lives moved on while Daniel's crumbled in full display. He walked down the street, head lowered, whispers following like shadows. Emma's voice rang in his memory. "You still have me." But even that hope shook under the weight. Daniel saw a billboard flashing his defaced image above him. The crowd glanced, smirked, some pointed. His chest heaved as shame surged hot in his veins. Betrayal was cruel, but loyalty was punished harsher. For defending one person, Emma was mocked too. The world demanded silence, and they had refused. Now, the price was blood. The storm outside had quieted, but inside Daniel's chest, thunder still roared. He sat in his living room, scrolling through old photos of himself, smiling at company parties, speeches he once gave where applause filled the air, and posts where colleagues praised his integrity. Now those same people were silent, some deleting their old praises as though his existence had become a disease to erase. He whispered, "Was I ever real to them, or just useful?" Emma sat across from him, her voice breaking as she said, "You were more than real, Daniel, but they only loved the shine." Her loyalty was a fragile flame, fighting a hurricane. Daniel remembered the laughter in his office just weeks ago, the way even Ryan used to pretend to clap him on the back. It all collapsed with the speed of a click, the illusion of friendship exposed as a cruel masquerade. He clenched his fists, but not in anger, in despair. His reflection in the black screen of the TV looked back at him like a stranger caught between past warmth and present ruin. Morning light spilled into the kitchen, but its warmth did not reach Daniel's heart. He stared at the empty chair across the table where his sister Lily once sat during Sunday breakfasts. Her silence screamed louder than any online attack. He scrolled her profile, seeing her post about trivial things, vacations, and casual smiles, but not a single word about him. "Not even you," he whispered, voice hollow. Emma tried to soften the blow, saying, "She's scared, Daniel. Fear makes people quiet." He slammed his fist lightly against the table, pain flickering across his eyes. "Quiet is betrayal," he said, "and it cuts deeper than words." The kitchen smelled of stale coffee, reminders of mornings that once brought comfort. Now, every shadow in the room felt heavy with abandonment. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence that Lily left behind. His memory replayed her promise, "We'll face everything together." That promise now felt like ash dissolving in his mouth. By afternoon, the office became a battlefield where Daniel was the lone soldier. He walked past desks where colleagues avoided his eyes, screens flashing articles that shredded his dignity. The enabler Ryan stood near the manager's door, laughing too loud, his polished suit a sharp contrast to Daniel's crumpled one. Emma's voice came through the phone in Daniel's pocket saying, "Breathe, you don't have to break here." He swallowed hard, his throat dry as whispers chased him like ghosts. Every nod, every smile he once received was gone, replaced by wary distance. His desk was stripped bare of the notes and pictures he once kept, as if even objects had conspired to abandon him. Ryan caught his eye briefly, a smug gleam flickering across his face before he turned away, basking in attention. Daniel sat down slowly, his chair creaking under the weight of shame. His heart pounded, as if every breath might shatter the silence. Evening shadows stretched long as Daniel sat by his window, staring at the city pulsing with careless light. His phone buzzed with messages not of comfort, but of distance. Sponsors who once begged for his face to front campaigns now wrote cold, rehearsed lines. "We regret to inform you we are ending our partnership." He read them aloud, his voice breaking at the final word each time. Emma sat nearby, eyes heavy, whispering, "They never knew you, Daniel. They only knew the version they sold." The weight of her loyalty pressed against him, both a blessing and a curse. He wanted to protect her, but her presence tethered her to his ruin. He turned his head toward her, eyes burning. "You'll be erased too if you stay." She shook her head softly, tears shining. "Then let me burn with you." The city lights flickered outside, each one a reminder of a world moving forward without him. The following morning, Daniel stepped outside, the air heavy with damp mist. Every billboard, every cafe screen, every whispered glance seemed to scream his name. He pulled his jacket tighter, but it could not shield him from the cold of recognition. Emma walked beside him, her head held defiantly high though her eyes betrayed fear. People passed, some sneering, some snapping photos, others pretending not to notice while their curiosity burned holes in his skin. Daniel muttered, "I'm not the villain they painted," but even his own words sounded fragile in the air. Emma squeezed his arm and said, "Then we'll make them see." Yet the crowd did not want truth. It wanted spectacle. Their laughter echoed behind him as though mocking every step. He felt like an actor dragged onto a stage where the script was already written. No defense, no truth, only judgment carved in stone by strangers he would never know. Daniel's inbox was a graveyard of rejection letters. Every brand that once flaunted his face now sent polite denials, wrapped in cold phrases like reputation risk. He muttered, "They don't even care if it's true." Emma leaned over his shoulder, her voice sharp with anger. "Truth doesn't sell, Daniel. Shame does." The weight of her words pressed harder than the emails themselves. He closed the laptop, the the glow of the screen still etched into his eyes like scars. His career, once built on years of sweat and late nights, crumbled faster than a sandcastle under a tide. Friends he once trusted no longer returned his calls. Silence wasn't passive anymore. It was a weapon used against him. Daniel felt his chest tighten, his breath shallow as though the walls of his apartment were closing in. He whispered, "Maybe they never saw me. Maybe I was just a mask they used." The office no longer felt like a place of work. It was a theater of whispers. Daniel entered with shoulders heavy, his footsteps echoing too loudly in the hushed space. Ryan stood confidently near the manager's desk, his laugh carrying across the room like a victory song. Daniel's eyes met his for a moment, and Ryan's smirk widened as though declaring ownership of the ground beneath them. Emma's voice cracked through his earpiece. "Don't let him win, Daniel. He's feeding on this." But Daniel felt hollow, his colleagues' eyes cutting him apart. Each turned head, each whispered phrase felt like another nail in a coffin. He tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. The betrayal wasn't in the shouts. It was in the silence that echoed around him, heavy and suffocating. Even at night, the storm followed him. Daniel scrolled through his phone on the subway, headlines glowing like curses. Fraud, hypocrite, cancelled. His own name burned him more than any insult. Emma's message flashed on screen. "Stop reading it, Daniel. It's poison." He sighed, unable to pull away. A teenager nearby chuckled, showing his phone to a friend with Daniel's face plastered across a meme. Laughter spilled into the carriage, stabbing Daniel deeper than words. He pulled his collar higher, but the whispers still clawed at his skin. He felt like a hunted man with nowhere left to hide. The city around him moved with uncaring speed, while inside, he crumbled slower, piece by piece, headline by headline. Lily's silence weighed heavier than the mob's noise. Daniel stood outside her apartment, staring at her name on the door. His knuckles hovered, but he couldn't knock. He remembered their childhood promises, her words, "We'll face everything together." But now, she had locked her loyalty behind silence. Emma's voice broke softly over the phone. "Maybe she's just afraid." Daniel clenched his jaw, eyes burning. Afraid of what? Loving her brother? He turned away from the door, footsteps echoing in the hallway. Each step felt like rejection, not from strangers, but from blood. Betrayal by family wasn't a shout, it was a void, and it consumed him from within. By the week's end, Daniel's world resembled ruins scattered across a battlefield. His job suspended him indefinitely, his bank account strained, and his name became a weapon wielded in conversations by people who never knew him. He sat with Emma in the park, the air heavy with autumn leaves falling around them. She whispered, "They can't erase who you are." But he shook his head, eyes hollow. "If no one believes me, then who am I?" Her hand squeezed his, firm but trembling, a fragile defiance against the storm. The enabler rose higher, Ryan's name now attached to projects Daniel once led. Friends scattered, family retreated, and Daniel remained in the eye of the storm, waiting for the next strike. He closed his eyes, exhaustion carving into every line of his face, bracing for what felt like an endless war with no shield. The air in Daniel's apartment was heavy with despair when the knock came. He opened the door to find Oliver, a quiet colleague long forgotten in the noise. Oliver's eyes darted nervously as he said, "Daniel, they twisted everything. I saw what happened that night." Daniel froze, the words striking harder than any headline. Emma, sitting nearby, leaned forward asking, "Why now, Oliver? Why not sooner?" His shoulders sagged, shame written in every line of his face. "Fear," he whispered, and because Ryan was pulling strings. The revelation landed like thunder, breaking the storm's rhythm. Daniel's chest rose sharply as hope cracked through despair for the first time. But hope carried its own fear. What if the truth was too late to matter? Oliver sat with his hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor as he spoke. Ryan fed lies to the press. He leaked half-truths and spun the rest. He wanted your chair, Daniel, and he knew the mob would do his work for him. Daniel's heart pounded as the pieces fit together. Emma clenched her fists, anger spilling in her voice, "And they punished you for loyalty while he climbed higher." Daniel's breathing quickened, fury and grief colliding. He remembered Ryan's smirk, his sudden rise, the laughter that followed Daniel's silence. Betrayal had a face now, not just a crowd. "Why, tell me now?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling. Oliver swallowed, replying, "Because watching this has been killing me." The words hung like a confession, the truth too late yet burning with urgency. The night deepened as Oliver unfolded his story. He described emails Ryan doctored, whispers he planted, and meetings where Daniel's loyalty was painted as weakness. "He made you the villain because he needed your downfall," Oliver said. Emma's hand touched Daniel's shoulder, her voice steady but pained. "They erased you so he could rise." Daniel stared at the floor, his mind replaying every moment. Ryan smiled at him, every handshake that now felt poisoned. His stomach twisted. Anger burned, but grief weighed heavier. "They loved the spectacle more than the truth," he muttered, "and I gave them fuel by standing for someone else." Oliver's silence confirmed it. The mob was not the architect, Ryan was. The mob was simply the weapon he wielded. Morning light cut through the blinds, sharp and unforgiving. Daniel stared into his mirror, the reflection not of a man broken, but of one hardened by betrayal. "He destroyed me for ambition," he whispered, voice steady. Emma stood behind him, arms folded, determination burning in her eyes. "Then we fight," she said, "because silence is what he counts on." Daniel's chest rose, resolve replacing despair. Yet fear lingered. What if truth could not pierce a mob that fed on blood? He turned to Emma, his eyes steady. "If we speak, they'll come for you harder." She met his gaze without flinching. "Let them. I'd rather burn with truth than live with lies." The air between them thickened with shared resolve. The world had taken everything, but in that moment, they refused to give it silence. The decision was made over coffee gone cold. Oliver placed a folder on the table, filled with screenshots and notes that tied Ryan to the lies. His voice shook as he said, "This is proof, Daniel. It's not much, but it's real." Daniel touched the papers, his fingers trembling as though holding both salvation and a weapon. Emma leaned forward, her voice fierce. "Then we use it. They wanted a villain. Let's show them who it really was." Daniel's breath came heavy, his heart pounding with a mix of terror and hope. The mob still roared outside, but inside, resolve grew like fire. He knew the truth might not save him. It might be too late. But it could expose Ryan, the one who betrayed him. For the first time since the storm began, Daniel felt something stronger than despair: purpose. The air at the office crackled with tension as Daniel stepped inside, carrying Oliver's folder. Every eye turned toward him, whispers rising like static. He felt the weight of judgment pressing down, but this time his shoulders did not bend. Ryan stood at the far end, his smirk sharp enough to cut glass. Emma's voice echoed in Daniel's memory. "Truth is worth bleeding for." He walked to the manager's desk, placing the folder down with hands that trembled but did not falter. "Look at the lies," Daniel said, his voice steady, each syllable carrying the weight of sleepless nights and shattered trust. For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, but Daniel's eyes locked onto him like steel. This was not surrender. This was the first strike of defiance. Ryan's laugh echoed sharp and cruel. Desperate men clutch at scraps. The room stirred as he waved a dismissive hand, but Oliver stepped forward, voice trembling yet clear. "I saw what he did. I saw everything." Gasps rippled through the office like cracks spreading across glass. Daniel's heart pounded as Oliver's words filled the air, truth battling against spectacle. Ryan's mask faltered, his jaw tightening, his smile thinning. Daniel whispered, "It's over," but fear gnawed at him. The mob outside would not vanish with truth alone. Emma's voice played in his head, reminding him that silence was Ryan's weapon, not theirs. Daniel inhaled sharply, bracing as the tide finally began to turn. Confrontation exploded. Ryan stepped forward, voice rising in rage. "You'll destroy everything I built." Daniel's reply cut sharp. "You destroyed me first." The words landed heavy, a declaration that carried years of trust shattered in seconds. The manager flipped through the folder, eyes widening at the evidence, while the office held its breath. Emma's text buzzed in Daniel's pocket, 3 words, "Don't back down." His chest burned with adrenaline, every muscle tensed for war. Ryan's mask crumbled as his voice cracked with desperation. "You think truth saves you? They already erased you." Daniel's fists clenched, but his voice rose steadier, "Then let the world see who held the knife." The room tilted into chaos, a storm within walls that could no longer hold silence. The news spread faster than fire. Within hours, Daniel's phone lit with headlines of Ryan's exposure. Yet the mob outside did not cheer truth. They roared louder, unwilling to release the spectacle. Daniel sat in his apartment, hands trembling as he whispered, "Even the truth won't free me." Emma placed her hand over his, steady and warm, "But it frees your name from his chains." He turned to her, eyes red. "At what cost? You've bled because of me." She shook her head, defiance burning. Better to bleed for loyalty than live hollow. Outside, protesters shouted his name, half in hate, half in confusion. Inside, Daniel felt the world collapsing and rebuilding at once, fragile and violent, like glass shattering into a new shape. The climax arrived not with peace but with fire. Daniel stood on the balcony of his apartment, the crowd below screaming his name in a chorus of hate and curiosity. Flashing lights from cameras painted him in blinding white, every angle capturing his fall or rise. He raised his voice above the chaos, shouting, "You erased me for standing by someone else. But betrayal built this stage you cheer on." His words cut through the air, echoing like thunder. Emma stood just behind him, eyes wet but unbroken. The mob's roar only grew, some booing, some hesitating, others recording every second. Daniel's chest heaved as the world watched, and for the first time, he no longer cowered. He stood in defiance, not free, but unbowed, daring the mob to see him, not as their villain, but as their mirror. The morning after the balcony outburst, Daniel sat at the kitchen table staring at headlines that called him everything from fallen hero to delusional fraud. The mob was split, but the noise never softened. Emma placed a cup of coffee in front of him, her hands trembling though her gaze was steady. "You forced them to see," she whispered, "whether they wanted to or not." Daniel shook his head slowly, voice hoarse, "But they didn't want truth, they wanted blood." Oliver's message buzzed on his phone, a reminder that Ryan had been placed on suspension pending investigation. For a moment, victory flickered, but it was hollow. The damage was irreversible, his name etched in controversy no matter the outcome. Daniel exhaled sharply, realizing the storm had ended for Ryan, but not for him. Outside, reporters swarmed the street like vultures, circling a carcass. Daniel watched through the blinds as microphones and cameras clustered below. Emma whispered, "They won't stop until you give them another show." He stepped back, shaking his head. Then, "I won't give them one." Silence had once been his prison, but now it became his only shield. The truth was out, Ryan exposed, but the mob had already tasted blood. Emma clenched her fists, muttering, "They don't care who bleeds as long as someone does." Daniel's heart pounded, not from fear but from exhaustion so deep it hollowed his bones. He turned from the window, voice low, "Let them scream. I'm done feeding them." The office issued a cold statement by noon. Daniel would not return, his image too compromised to represent the company. Emma read it aloud, her voice trembling with fury. "After everything, they still bury you." Daniel closed his eyes, whispering, "They don't want truth, they want distance." His desk was already cleared, his name scrubbed from projects. Ryan's suspension barely made the news, overshadowed by Daniel's spectacle. The mob had consumed him so thoroughly that even vindication tasted like ash. Emma reached for his hand, her loyalty anchoring him as the rest of the world drifted further away. He held her hand tightly, afraid of losing the only person who had not abandoned him. The silence between them was heavy, but in it lay the last fragments of dignity he could hold on to. Later that night, Daniel stood outside Lily's apartment once more. He didn't knock. He simply left a letter at her door, folded and heavy with words he couldn't say aloud. In it he wrote, "Silence broke me more than hate ever could. I hope someday you find the courage I needed from you." His footsteps echoed as he walked away, the hallway dim and endless. Emma waited for him at the street corner, her face pale but her eyes resolute. "You don't need her voice anymore," she said softly. Daniel looked up at the night sky, his chest tightening. Family had failed him, the world had condemned him, but Emma's loyalty burned bright against the darkness. It wasn't redemption, but it was survival. Days later, Daniel sat in the park where leaves fell quietly around him. The crowd had moved on to new scandals, but the scar they left remained etched into his skin. Emma sat beside him, her presence silent but steady. He whispered, "They'll forget me, but I won't forget what it cost." She turned to him, eyes unwavering. "Then let the cost be your strength, not your chain." He nodded faintly, though doubt still clouded his heart. The world had not given him justice, only survival. Betrayal had destroyed him, but loyalty had kept him from vanishing entirely. As the wind carried leaves across the path, Daniel realized survival was not victory, but it was enough to keep breathing. And sometimes, that was the bravest act left. The city buzzed with new scandals, Daniel's name fading into the background noise of outrage. Yet for him, the silence was not peace. He walked the streets unnoticed, but every glance felt like judgment lingering. Emma walked beside him, her arm brushing his, whispering, "They've moved on." He shook his head, voice rough, "I'm still living what they forgot." The crowd flowed past without care, proof that he was no longer the story, but still its prisoner. He carried the weight of every whisper, every silence, every betrayal. The world had erased his name from their feeds, but not from his own skin. He realized then that survival did not mean freedom. It meant learning to breathe under the shadow of ghosts. At night, Daniel scrolled his phone, watching a new celebrity's downfall trend across the top. Hashtags surged, comments cut with cruelty he knew too well. Emma looked over his shoulder, murmuring, "It's someone else now." Daniel's throat tightened as he whispered, "And tomorrow, it'll be someone else again." His reflection stared back at him in the black glass of the phone, a man who had lived through the fire and now watched it consume another. He set the phone down, shaking his head. The mob did not hunger for truth, only for the next sacrifice. He felt sick with the knowledge that his ruin had been entertainment, just as this new name would be. Loyalty had punished him. Betrayal had rewarded Ryan. And silence had destroyed what family meant. The cycle never ended. Oliver met Daniel in the quiet corner of a cafe. His voice was heavy with regret. "I should have spoken sooner." Daniel looked at him, expression calm but tired. "You did when you could bear it." Oliver lowered his gaze, shame tightening his jaw. Emma reached across the table, her words cutting through. "The truth always comes late, but at least it came." Daniel nodded, though his chest ached. He knew Oliver's confession had exposed Ryan, but it had not saved him. He whispered, "Loyalty cost me everything. Betrayal gave him everything. And silence, silence, silence killed the rest." The cafe around them buzzed with life, but at their table, it felt like a eulogy whispered to no one who would remember. Daniel returned to the park where leaves had fallen weeks before. The air was colder now, winter's breath seeping into the trees. Emma sat with him on the same bench, her presence steady as always. He whispered, "I lost my career, my family, my name. All I have left is this scar they carved into me." Emma's voice was soft but fierce, "And the scar proves you survived." He turned to her, eyes glassy. "Survival isn't justice." She squeezed his hand, her silence carrying more weight than words. The park was empty, save for the rustling wind, and Daniel realized survival was not enough to fill the void, but it was the only weapon left against the world that thrived on erasure. That night, Daniel stood at the window of his apartment, the city lights flickering below like 1,000 indifferent eyes. Emma slept quietly on the couch, Exhaustion etched across her face. He whispered to the glass. They never wanted truth. They only wanted someone to burn. His reflection stared back at him, not the man he once was, but the one carved by fire and silence. He closed his eyes, feeling the ache of betrayal, the sting of loyalty punished, and the emptiness left behind. His final words escaped in a breath that fogged the glass. Betrayal wounds, but loyalty kills. The city hummed below, uncaring, carrying his final truth into the endless night.